This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, the Florida company with all the IP addresses, extortionware is a huge new trend, New York State weighs in on attacks and says zero trust, tech earnings across the board, the call out by the Ransomware Task Force on MSPs, Google's privacy stumble, and are you following Basecamp? I'll tell you why you should. That and more. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let's dive into the stories. Let's lead with a weird one. As reported in the Washington Post, Florida-based Global Resource Systems, LLC, started managing a large portion of unused IP addresses that were previously owned by the U.S. military. The company, founded in September with no publicly reported federal contracts and no obvious public-facing website, now manages nearly 175 million IP addresses. This is a larger block than most of the largest internet providers. And as of Friday, we know is connected to the Defense Digital Service, which reports directly to the Secretary of Defense. Positioned as a SWAT team of nerds, it is tasked with solving emergency problems for the department and conducting experiments to focus on bigger technological leaps. This pilot effort is about publicizing the IP space owned by the Pentagon and will assess, evaluate, and prevent unauthorized use of DoD IP address space and may identify potential vulnerabilities. This IP range allows large amounts of data to be collected and analyzed for threat intelligence, among other uses. So why do we care? The DoD is running a massive data collection effort on the internet? Well, that's why we care. Tactically, many listeners who manage data networks will be noting a new active IP block that hadn't been there before. That's new. Strategically, the serious investment in cyber by the DoD is why we notice. Couple this with the stories we have about the changing tone of lawmakers, and we see a major shift in U.S. strategy playing out. I'm not going to put much stock in the timing of this. The service went active in the last few minutes of the Trump administration, but this wouldn't be lit up last minute. It would have been going on for significantly longer. While the government response teams are closed on SolarWinds, the analysis continues. Turns out the effort is a lot bigger than first believed. Researchers at RiskIQ published a report on the network infrastructure footprint of the attackers, labeling it as significantly larger than previously identified. RiskIQ's Team Atlas has identified an additional 18 servers linked to the SolarWinds espionage campaign, a number the firm says represents a, quote, 56% increase in the size of the adversary's known command and control footprint. This was discovered by mapping the beacons in the command and control network. The network had significantly numbers hosted within the U.S. by cloud infrastructure providers, including AWS. To add to that, CNN Sourcing is also reporting that Russia's SVR intelligence agency is likely still in the networks, with access to breached networks. This is considered consistent with previous history. Now, why do we care? I was taught early in my career that once you're breached, you can never fully trust the system again without starting over. This rings in my ears around these breaches. We likely will never know the full extent of this breach. The lesson is that you never know the full extent, and it's always more than you think. Bit more market data from ISG for first quarter 2021. The global market for deals that exceeded $5 million in value for both as-a-service offerings and managed services reached $17.1 billion, up 11% over a year ago and 4% over the fourth quarter of 2020. The first quarter of 2021 was the third consecutive quarter of global growth since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in the second quarter of 2020, according to ISG. The as-a-service portion of the IT services space is growing much faster than traditional managed services, the report notes. The value of deals involving the consumption of cloud services tracked by ISG increased 15% to reach a record $9.9 billion level in the first quarter. Within the as-a-service segment, revenues generated by infrastructure as a service deals reached a record $7.2 billion, up 18% year over year. Software as a service produced a record $2.7 billion, up 7% year over year. ISG is forecasting the market for cloud-based services will grow 18% globally in 2021, down slightly from its 20% forecast at the start of the year. ISG has raised its 2021 growth forecast for managed services to 5%, up 2 points from the start of the year. Now, why do we care? The roll-up numbers are great. This is likely showing some industries even better than we think, dragged down by others. As a service, that's the win. This data is clearly larger deals, but that's helpful to understand the trend. IaaS and SaaS growing more than managed services, which I expect to see play out in the SMB as well. It's a good market out there too. While I do hate the phrase digital transformation, there's some value in the research around it. Let's pull from Tech Isle today. Small business adoption of digital transformation is still at a primary stage. In 27% of small businesses, digital transformation is either non-existent, in the shadows, or siloed. However, this is vastly lower from 51% in 2020, indicating that small businesses drastically improved their approach to transformation within the last year. Mid-market firms, which have higher overall digital transformation adoption rates, are also much more advanced in their approaches. 90% of mid-market firms take either an inclusive or holistic approach to digital transformation. Data shows that there's been an increase of 34% within mid-market firms and a corresponding increase of 26% within upper mid-market firms in their approach to holistic digital transformation from siloed or inclusive approaches. To explore the impact of digital transformation, Tech Isle compared the stages to different business and technology measures. The most intriguing result came from evaluating revenue trends with the approach to digital transformation. Across small businesses, high-growth organizations are at least twice as likely to report a holistic approach to digital transformation than their low-growth, no-growth peers, and 2 to 3 times less likely to have an in-the-shadows approach or no digital transformation activities at all. Small businesses with a holistic, inclusive approach are experiencing a 6.6% revenue growth compared to only 2.5% within the siloed in-the-shadows segments. Within the mid-market, approaches may be similar, but the growth experienced by the holistic segment is higher, 6.5%, as compared to 3.6%. Even in the upper mid-market firms, the growth rate is 7.4%, higher than the firms with siloed in-the-shadows approaches. So why do we care? It's this holistic approach that catches my eye. We're looking for ways to maximize business outcomes for us and for our customers. And here's the takeaway. And the bigger the company, the bigger the gain. That's intuitive, but useful. Thus, what we're looking for is a way to take technology, leverage it holistically across a business, and get the biggest gains. Sounds easy, right? If it was, everyone would be doing it. But that's why there's high margin opportunity in thinking this way. Let's talk more extortion around security. It's clearly a growing trend. The Revil gang, who attacked Apple's supplier Quanta and stole data, is upping their threats. After not receiving a ransom payment, they leaked Apple schematics. Now they've taken those down from their data leak site. This after a private chat between Revil and Quanta started 4 days ago. And they've offered a reduced ransom. It's now $20 million, down from $50 million. It comes with a new deadline of May 7th. The gang says they will publish drawings for the new iPad and new Apple logos if they do not receive a response. Unrelated, the DC Metropolitan Police Department has confirmed a breach. The Babook ransomware gang has now leaked screenshots of stolen data. The gang stole 250 gigabytes of unencrypted files. They posted screenshots of the data they stole and have indicated they will start contacting gangs to warn them of police informants if not contacted in 3 days. Now, why do we care? Extortionware. We've moved beyond simple ransoms to full-on extortion. These are high-profile examples to consider as you think about the consequences. Use these as examples. What would be the worst-case scenario if your or your customers' data was in the hands of gangs? What do you not want exposed that would weaken your brand or your standing or your intellectual property? Think like the criminals because they are out there devising ways to steal your data and then threaten you back. Kaspersky has released a report focused on the impact of COVID-19 on the relationships between customers, vendors, and channel partners. The survey found that partners in both Canada and the US agreed that video or phone calls are the best ways to engage existing partners, with 54% answering in the affirmative. 76% of respondents said they'll go back to pre-pandemic models for generating sales, including in-person sales meetings, once COVID-19 is on the decline. 73% of respondents also said they will continue to conduct video calls and meetings once COVID-19 is declining. 44% of respondents said speed of response has become more difficult due to COVID-19 when it comes to working with vendors. Related answers said that the ability to make fast purchasing decisions at 42% and adapting to the fast-changing landscape at 40% were the top problems here. Now, why do we care? I always enjoy stringing together the story. People like to get a video or phone call. They don't really know how it will go on the other side of the pandemic, so answered yes to everything. And speed of communications are still an issue. It's that conflicting yes data I'm highlighting. They don't know. That's the key message. I'm not reading anything into this other than to dismiss that data. I'm going further into this on the weekend bonus episode, but the trick is we don't entirely know. That's an opportunity, but don't assume too much here. A quick tech earnings roundup hitting only the stuff I think IT services companies care about. Alphabet is up nearly double on cloud and has reduced their operating loss over half. This is a material revenue stream for them, and it's non-ad based. It's strong in both GCP and Workplace. Microsoft saw Azure grow 50% in the quarter, meeting their expectations. Teams is now at 140 million daily active users. Dynamics 365 is up 45% over the previous year's quarter. Don't count Office out too, that's up 5%, and consumer subscription of Microsoft 365 is up 27%. So why do we care? Google has always been criticized for being a one revenue stream company. Despite all their big bets, they make money on ads. Their cloud efforts are trending quickly to being a legitimate, profitable business, and that's material. Microsoft is crushing it. Cloud is the biggest driver, and subscriptions. Their collaboration platforms are a massive growth area. IT services companies obviously should be leveraging that. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. The New York State Department of Financial Services released a report on the SolarWinds attack. This is the financial regulator for the state, and they warned that the next financial crisis could come from an attack like this, where the incident hits many targets at once. The regulator was the first in the U.S. to set rules for protecting consumer information held by banks and financial institutions. In the wake of the incident, they are recommending the zero trust approach to security. Now, why do we care? This is first steps towards regulation in my mind. The recommendations come out, and guidance will eventually become regulation. From the report itself, the department was created in 2011 as the merger of the former banking and insurance departments to, quote, establish a modern system of regulation, rulemaking, and adjudication responsive to the needs of the banking and insurance industries and New York consumers and residents. So yes, this is a first step. It's also clearly a chorus, zero trust, and the message over and over is very, very clear. The Ransomware Task Force, which is a public party coalition, has shared a framework for actions to disrupt the ransomware business model. It's a list of 48 specific recommendations from the Institute for Security and Technology. Outlined are 5 key priority recommendations, and most are focused on broad governmental response, which you get a feel for in the first, quote, coordinated international diplomatic and law enforcement efforts must proactively prioritize ransomware through a comprehensive resource strategy, including using a carrot and stick approach to direct nation states away from providing safe havens to ransomware criminals. Also, let's highlight the recommendation for domestic and international insurance companies. Establish an insurance sector consortium to share ransomware loss data and accelerate best practices around insurance underwriting and risk management. And then specifically, Action 3.3.3. Require managed services providers to adopt and provide baseline security measures. In detail, the program could include, quote, adherence with a cyber hygiene program, for example, CIS Controls Implementation Group 165 and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, mandatory disclosure across the MSP's customer base if there is a ransomware incident involving the MSP's service offering, and forming an MSP ISAC, an information sharing and analysis center specific to this industry. The MSP industry in SMB is specifically dinged. Quote, MSPs do not commonly provide extensive security coverage or ransomware mitigations. End quote. Now, why do we care? The task force explicitly calls out MSPs as not providing mitigations, are calling for regulations to require that, and pushing that broadly. They're also calling out the involvement of the insurance industry. I swear I wasn't in any of these meetings, despite it sounding exactly like me. So a major policy piece aimed at governmental agencies comes recommending a requirement, i.e. a law, around managed services providers. Yeah, that's why we care. Regulation isn't just coming, it's the recommendation from those specifically thinking about this field. An update on JEDI, that long-standing conflict between Amazon and Microsoft in the court about the award of the cloud contract for the Pentagon. A judge has ruled that Amazon's claim won't be dismissed. Now, why do we care? Now it's just a matter of wondering how long this contract survives. Back in January, the DoD indicated that if this became a lengthy deposition process, the project would become untenable. Litigation may just kill the entire deal and start it all over again. I definitely feel obligated to update on this one, as I've advocated for this feature. As previously covered, Google and Apple collaborated on their COVID-19 contact tracing framework and assured the public about the data being both anonymized and not shared. Turns out there is a privacy flaw in the Android version of the product, as found by the markup. But more importantly, when researchers alerted Google in February of this year, Google failed to change it. The researchers say that Google dismissed their concerns until the markup contacted Google. Now, why do we care? I'm far less focused on the vulnerability than I am on the reaction. While I would have hoped it didn't have an issue, we all know that software is potentially flawed. It's about how you respond that always matters. This is why notification and disclosure laws work. Pressure and exposure drive behavior. And that's why we care. Smartphone global shipments for Q1 2021 are 27% above the same time last year. That in new data from Canalys. Apple earnings reports are out, and they had a massive 54% revenue gain year over year. That's about the same as Google and Microsoft combined. Services for the company, their second largest business, is up 21%, and they now have more than 600 million paid subscribers across their offerings. And the iPhone, their biggest business, saw revenues grow 60%, and unit sales around 50% growth year over year. Gartner tells us employees spent 11% more time on laptops, smartphones, and tablets in 2020. A bigger deal, more than half of respondents say they personally obtained apps or web services for collaboration, and 55% use personally owned devices for work some of the time. Employees are also more stressed. 6 in 10 respondents to a Unify Square survey say their stress levels are up working remotely, and 54% of the workforce describes themselves as exhausted, per a survey by Blind. 43% of respondents to a ClickUp survey have been frustrated by the number of tech tools and apps they use for work. 42% say their company is stuck in the dark ages when it comes to adopting new technology tools or apps. Managers are also experiencing the squeeze. A survey by Mequilibrium found 22% of managers have low resilience and are at high risk for burnout and PTSD, have taken on 1.7 times more work during the pandemic than non-managers, and saw a decrease in motivation 3 times higher than non-managers. Why do we care? I like contrasting the data here: device proliferation and market growth, and the cost on people. Apple is huge, and their services play is no joke. Let's assume their growth in iPhones, plus smartphones in general, is a surge in personal devices. The dispersion of work outside the 4 walls of traditional offices is jet fuel, and should be thought of carefully by those in IT services and those dealing with security. And this mode of work is causing pressure, a lot of it. Offering solutions that balance these conflicting forces is where the value is. I'm ending the week with something for your weekend. If you want to dig into some serious workplace dynamics, catch up on what's going on at Basecamp. This is a long story, not done justice by short format, but I'll try. Casey Newton's reporting detailing the banning of all societal and political discussions at the company. It started with an internal discussion about a list of best names ever of customers, which initially seemed like an innocent way to play at work. And as society examined speech and corporate responsibility, it began to look more and more inappropriate and racist. Discussion about the list internally at the company was lengthy, and an intense examination about culture and communication. This from a company whose 2 leaders were outspoken on culture, remote work, and collaboration, and make a collaboration product and have written books on the subject. And then shut it all down. The backlash went further. The company's leaders posted a follow-up, actually airing some of the internal emails and discussions. The company is now even offering a severance package of up to 6 months' salary for those who wish to leave after the changes. Now, why do we care? I distinctly can't do this story justice in a few minutes. I'm highlighting the links, which I'm including in the notes, for listeners to dig into. I bring up culture and the use of technology a lot on this show as a big opportunity for IT services companies, and I do believe it. I also know it's really hard and constantly evolving. I like the service because it's hard and it's not something that can be commoditized. But at the same time, this isn't just part-time. It's going to take an investment. I'm highlighting this example because it's very public, and because I expect a lot of companies will be reckoning with this too. Remember, Basecamp is about 60 employees. They're an SMB too. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSP Radio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech. And I'll talk to you again next week.